What's going on? Okay, everyone, thank you very much for being here. It's great to be here today with Angus Taylor, and thank you very much for being there this morning with Sam Cale, who's doing a fantastic job. And it was an opportunity to talk again, of course, about one of our signature policies, a way in which we really want to help struggling families at the moment. A reduction of 25 cents a litre in fuel is going to be great for pensioners. It's going to be great for uni students. It's going to be great for families, but also for business as well, for people who are involved in the moving of any goods around the economy. All of that additional petrol cost, all of the additional costs of running a business under this government, it's all being passed on to consumers. And so our energy policy, our fuel policy is all about how do we address the cost of living pressures that have built up under this government in the economy. Now, we know that Australian families have lived through almost 2 years of household recession. That's what Labor's already delivered during this term of government. Now, the Treasurer's out there talking about a 50-point reduction in interest rates, which means obviously that he sees a recession coming for our economy. He wouldn't be talking about 50 points as a reduction next month if he didn't believe that there was going to be a significant souring of the Australian economy on his watch. The Prime Minister, of course, is completely out of his depth when it comes to economics and how to manage the economy, and he's demonstrated that in subsequent budgets. And Australian families have paid the price for it. We have seen Australian families suffer because of electricity prices going up. We've seen gas prices go up. Groceries are up by 30% in our country under this government's watch. But not just families, also small businesses. 29,000 have gone broke under the Albanese government over the course of the last 2.5, 3 years. That is the legacy of this government. And this election is about who has a better plan to manage our economy in very difficult and uncertain times. Who has the ability to keep our country safe in a very uncertain period in history. And as we get closer to the election, I think Australians will continue to focus on who is better able to manage the economy and therefore to manage the cost of living crisis that Labor has created, who is best able to deal with the housing crisis that Labor has created. And we're cutting migration and we're making sure that we can get Australians into housing more quickly as a result of that policy. So there is a lot at stake at this upcoming election, and I'm really pleased to be here with Angus today. Angus and I have worked together for many, many years. He has a depth of experience, a breadth of experience, as you know, in the private sector, but also in Parliament as well. And he's done a fantastic job as Shadow Treasurer and would be one of the most qualified treasurers of our country if we're given the great honour to lead this nation. And I'm really pleased to be here with him today.
Well, thank you, Peter. It's great to be here with you. And of course, we're facing very uncertain economic times. We've seen a crash in our capital markets, in the value of many Australians' assets, their superannuation and other investments that they've made over the last week or so. We've seen very significant reductions in those portfolios. And of course, that means Australians are poorer than they were just a week ago. And we know there's still a great deal of uncertainty. There is much still to go in this from every appearance, and Australians are worried. They're deeply worried. Now, we have a situation where the buffers just aren't there. The buffers aren't there. We've seen household budgets absolutely decimated in recent times. The biggest reduction in our standard of living for Australian households, their real disposable incomes, in our history. The biggest we've ever seen. Bigger than any of our peer countries. And it means that households have very little room to move at a time like this. And we see retirees and those approaching retirement who are seeing their nest eggs being slashed as a result of what's happening. We also see younger Australians who are saving up to buy a home or to start a business, who again are really suffering as they see their nest eggs being slashed as a result of the global uncertainty we're seeing right now. And at a time like this, what we need most of all is strong economic management, strong and stable leadership. Now, I managed to have a briefing with the Treasury Secretary just in the last day or so, and it is clear that this shock is not just likely to be one to growth of the economy, 7 consecutive quarters, almost 2 years, as Peter just said, of a household recession, and of course, what we're seeing now is further impact on the growth of the economy. But it's also clear that this shock that we're seeing and the tariff barriers that are being established will be inflationary. And Treasury has made that very clear. It will be inflationary. And so those two things are the worst of all possible worlds. It is a very ugly situation with inflationary pressures and slower growth pressures on an economy that hasn't been growing in a way which is delivered to hardworking Australians. Meanwhile, it is clear that the Treasurer is completely out of touch and out of his depth. And as usual in that situation, he spends his time forecasting, not managing the economy, but forecasting the economy. Well, we need right now strong management of the economy. He's telling us what his forecasts are for interest rates. He's not telling us what his forecasts are for growth, and it must be a very damaging situation he has in mind, but he needs to explain it because that's not consistent with what we saw with the Treasury modelling. He has also not asked Treasury to look in particular at two aspects of what we're seeing right now that I would have thought were very sensible to ask Treasury to look at. The first is what's happening to people's wealth, to their assets, and how that might impact the economy. And the second is the prospect of reciprocation of these tariffs. Treasury hasn't modelled either of those things, and the Treasurer hasn't asked Treasury to. And you would have thought in situations like this he would do exactly that. We have asked for daily briefings from the Treasury Secretary because we think it's appropriate at a time like this that leaders in this country be across the issues, understanding how it's unfolding, given how dynamic it is, and are making sure that the settings are right for the situation we face. Now, we know the best way to deal with a crisis is to make sure you've got the buffers to deal with it. And as I said earlier, household buffers just aren't there, but government buffers aren't either. With deficits as far as the eye can see, almost $180 billion of deficits over the next few years, the average Australian family with $125,000 of government debt and interest payments by the end of the next term on Labor's own predictions. We just don't have those. We just don't have those buffers. But we know strong economic management is the pathway through, and that means economic management that beats inflation sustainably. And we are not there yet. And it's very clear from Treasury modelling we have risks to inflation now. Boosting growth and investment by backing small business, fixing energy and housing, and providing that targeted relief where it really counts for hardworking Australians, 25 cents a litre, the cost of their fuel. We know strong and responsible economic management is the key at a time like this. Australians have been able to trust in that management in the past with coalition governments. We need to get this country back on track, keep it on track in the face of a very uncertain economic environment.
Okay, all right, we might start. Mark, start here and then we'll work around.
Thanks very much, Mr. Dutton. Is Australia heading into recession?
Well, it is under Labor. Obviously, the government just hasn't prepared our economy. Labor has made decisions in subsequent budgets now which make it harder for the economy to function with international headwinds. And as we've seen with Labor governments at a state level, but previous Labor governments as well, there is always a desire to spend and then to tax, and inflation goes up and prices go up across the economy. That's exactly what's happened again under this Labor government. So I think there are real concerns, and the question is, what is best for the Australian economy? What is best, as Angus points out, is that if we have strong and competent managers of the economy, and we can achieve that after the election with a change of government. We have done it before, and as you know, during the course of COVID, and I sat around the table for all of these decisions in relation to COVID about how we should help families and small businesses and people retain their jobs and their connection with employers, and we provided that support to get us through the period of COVID. Now, we had made decisions in the budget which put us in a much better position going into COVID than what this government has created over the last 3 years going into what is a period of uncertainty. But what Australians do know is that the Coalition is a better economic manager than the Labor Party, and we'll demonstrate that after the election. But this is a big decision for Australians. We need to make sure that we don't have a Green Labor government in Canberra, because it would be a disaster for families and for the economy more broadly.
Mr. Dutton, as you say, uncertain times. What danger is there for you that those stick with the devil?
Well, the focus for me is how can we help families and how can we help businesses get through this really difficult period under Labor. This is 3 years that people want to forget. It's a 3-year lost period for our country, because if you're a family with an average mortgage, you've gone back $50,000 under this government. The Prime Minister's promising 70 cents a day by way of tax cut in 15 months' time, which shows he's completely out of touch with Australians and where they're at the moment. Our plan is to provide immediate assistance from day one with a 25 cent per litre reduction in unleaded and diesel. And that will have a positive impact, not just for families, to help them out. If they're a 2-car family, probably about $30 a week. But also, with our other policies, we can help business bring their costs down as well, so that we don't see further increases in electricity costs, in gas prices, and in groceries. Families are putting items out of their trolley back onto the shelves under this government because they can't afford the bill when they get to the checkout. People are stopping going to the doctors under the Albanese government because they can't afford the out-of-pocket expense. That's the economy that Labor's created. And if we see further actions out of the United States or retaliatory action from China or other countries, then there is a very significant chance of a recession in the United States, of a global recession otherwise. And those waves, those huge tsunami waves, will hit our shore in no time at all. And we need to have a competent government able to deal with it. And that's what Angus and I and Jane and our team offer to the Australian people at the next election.
Mr. Dutton, you said before you want to deport foreign criminals such as the NZYC cohort. If elected, will you introduce a new legal mechanism to do this?
Well, I think I demonstrated as a police officer that I was always very serious about protecting the community, and I did that for 10 years, and I'm very proud of my service as a police officer. And you deal with some of the most difficult circumstances. For me, seeing women in domestic violence situations, or seeing children having been sexually abused, or taking a statement from somebody who had been sexually assaulted, that had a huge impact on me, and it does to this day. And so I've always been influenced by how I can use the position that I've had to make our community safer. And as Home Affairs and Immigration Minister, I brought in a lot of people, good people, into our country from all parts of the world, from war-torn parts of the world. They've become wonderful Australians. But I also cancelled the visas of over 6,000 people who had committed serious domestic violence offences, sexual offences against women and children, who had been involved in the importation of drugs, and hardcore drugs that lead to kids breaking into houses and stealing cars to fuel that drug habit. And I'm proud of that outcome, and I'm not going to step back from it. Now, those numbers of deportations have fallen off a cliff under this government because they don't see it as a priority. So as Prime Minister, would I do everything I could within my power to keep Australians safe? Absolutely.
Mr. Dutton,
Mr. Dutton, just on the potential of a living recession, what sort of approach would the coalition take? Would you rule out, given the state of the budget, the type of large stimulus we saw during COVID under the coalition and under Labor during the GFC, which people have attributed to avoiding a recession in that instance?
Well, the Treasurer of our country is talking about obviously the prospect of a recession, or a recession coming very quickly. And that's why he's talking about 50 points reduction in interest rates, unless he's just doing that for political reasons. But if he believes that it's necessary to drop interest rates by 50 points in a month's time, he's telling Australians that there are difficult times ahead under Labor. That's exactly what he's doing. And as a coalition, I will always, and Angus will always, adhere to the principles of a coalition government. That is, to live within our means, to make sure that we can provide support to families, and make sure that we're not continuing to build on the pressure that families are under by pushing prices up all the time. And that's what the renewables only policy has done of Chris Bowen's, and it's what the economic decisions have ended up doing under this government as well. So, Andrew?
On the Queensland government today is announcing that it's going to extend the life of its coal-fired generators. Is that something you welcome? What will be the impact of that on your gas plan, given that essentially all coal means pure gas in theory? And on radio today, you said that you don't support battery subsidy schemes. Are you planning at all to have some sort of household assistance incentive scheme for electrification, like solar panels and batteries?
Well, if we've got announcements to make, we can make them in due course. But the point I'd make about the announcement is that it's similar to the announcements that we've seen in Victoria by the Labor Party there. It's similar to the announcements we've seen by Labor in New South Wales, and similar to what we've seen in Western Australia under the Labor Party there. So I think there's a realisation that the government's renewables only policy has just been a train wreck. And if you ask yourself, well, why did Mr Albanese promise a $275 a year cut in my electricity price, and now I'm paying $1,300 more under this government? You know it's because their policy has failed. And it's not just your household, it's the local butcher, and it's the IGA store, and it's the farmer. All of those electricity bills have gone up, and that's what's fueled the price increases at the supermarket for groceries. And the Prime Minister doesn't have any solution. All he's talking about is pushing up power prices further. And under our plan, we want to make sure we get those prices down, because if we do that, we can reduce the cost of electricity, and we can reduce the cost of gas, and we can make sure that our economy is more resilient. But that, I think, is just reflecting the reality of what's required from the energy system. You need that baseload power. The Prime Minister wants to pretend to you that it's going to be green hydrogen. Well, prices would double, and it's not commercially viable, and Andrew Forrest and many others are pulling capital out of that. So that's not prospective, and I think he should be called out for it. So in relation to gas, we talk about bringing 50 to 100 petajoules into the market, which is important, but there's a range there because some of the settings will change, and we have the capacity to move that around.
Mr. Dutton, if you don't support Labor's plan to train 1,200 new mental health professionals, how do you plan on boosting the workforce? And one point is, you just said that you would have thought the Treasurer would have asked for modelling on reciprocal tariffs. Does that mean you want reciprocal tariffs on the table?
Firstly, in relation to mental health issues, when I was Health Minister, one of the things I was most passionate about was making sure that we could get money into mental health services. And we worked with Pat McGorry and Headspace to expand the Headspace services up to, I think it was 100 at the time. I spoke about mental health in my first budget and reply speech, or since I became leader, and I've spoken about it regularly since then. There's roughly about the same investment at this election by both parties into mental health, and I think that's a great thing. And I think it is good if we can try and increase the workforce. I think it is good if we can try and provide support to clinicians. Don't forget that Professor Michael Carr-Gregg called for the sacking of the health minister when they cut by 50% the number of services or sessions that somebody with complex needs, a young person with complex needs, could access from their psychologist. So the track record of Labor, with a massive reduction in bulk billing under this government, people having to pay more to go to the doctor and making a decision not to go to the doctor, I mean, that is the record of Labor. So we'll invest as appropriate in the mental health space as we will in health, but I wouldn't buy Labor's lines today, and I'll hand over to Angus.
Thanks for the question. Absolutely not. We don't want to see reciprocal tariffs. We don't want to see, well, because China is threatening reciprocal tariffs, and we know there's a real risk that they will come from other sources as well, like Europe. The history of trade barriers going up like this, the history, if you go back at when they've occurred in the past, is they are often reciprocated. And you would have thought a treasurer who understands economics, understands economic history, and he clearly doesn't, would say to the Treasury Secretary, can you please have a look at this? What's it mean for our economy? What's it going to do to the global economy? And most importantly, what's it going to do to the Australian economy? He hasn't asked for that. I spoke with the Treasury Secretary. It is clear the Treasurer has not asked for that. And I think that's extraordinary. I mean, it shows you how out of his depth he is, how out of touch he is, and how little he understands about economics and economic history. It also is beyond comprehension that he didn't ask Treasury to look carefully at how the impact on capital markets we're seeing right around us at the moment, it's pretty obvious what impact that's going to have on our economy. He hasn't asked for that. And this is a Treasurer who does not know what he's doing. And we see that because we have seen the biggest hit to Australian standard of living in our history, worse than any other peer country. And this guy is telling Australians it's all okay. Well, it's not all okay. It's not all okay.
Okay. We've got a few more on this side, then we'll come across this side.
How are you feeling that it's forum? And if it's true the Prime Minister has Daniel Andrews helping him run lines, who's assisting you in your preparation?
Well, I'm looking forward to the debate tonight. As you know, we wrote to the Prime Minister a few months ago, or 2 months ago, I think it was, asking for 4 debates. So far, the Prime Minister's only committed to 2 formally, and I hope that he can commit to the other 2 as well. So I'm looking forward to tonight. I hope that Daniel Andrews is out publicly with the Prime Minister. If it's good enough for him to tell the Prime Minister how he should run the debate and how he should run the economy and how good he did in Victoria, I'd love to see Daniel Andrews out with the Prime Minister every day between now and the election. And if there's a spare seat there as well, why not Jacinda Ardern? Jacinda Ardern, because if you want a snapshot of what economic management looks like under Labor, go no further than looking at what's happening in Victoria, what's happened under Daniel Andrews, what's happening under Jacinda Ardern. It's an economic train wreck, and Victorians know it, and they're angry about it. And if you think that a second term of Labor is going to be any different to what we've seen in Victoria, then you don't understand political history in this country. So preparation's good, and I'm looking forward to tonight.
Mr. Dutton, the former Liberal candidate disendorsed the party due to a faction which he claims that members are also after the your election campaign. Can we get your response?
Well, there were a number of issues, not just those that have been made public in relation to the candidate, and we took a decision to replace Ben as the candidate. That's the decision we've taken. I wish him well, and it's the only public commentary I've got to make in relation to it.
Mr. Dutton, on that issue, if I might, one of the issues cited in the disendorsement of Benjamin Britten was his position that women should not hold the front line or combat roles in the Australian Defence.
No, Tim, as I said, it goes well beyond that. So you talk about what's publicly.
Okay, but well, perhaps one question to you then is, what's your view on whether women should hold combat roles in the Australian Defence Force? And can you tell us what's your defence spokesman's view on it? And would you ever appoint a defence minister who opposed women in combat roles in their defence?
Well, Tim, I think you saw my record as Defence Minister in relation to women serving in any role that they wanted to serve in the Australian Defence Force, and that would be the position under any government that I led. And I think I demonstrated when I was in the defence portfolio, and again, I think this is a real consideration for people at this election. The Prime Minister says we live in the most precarious period since 1945 and then takes 80 billion out of defence. I want to make sure that we can invest into defence because we do live in an uncertain time, and we do need a leader of our country who can make decisions to keep our country safe. I think the Prime Minister is out of his depth when it comes to economics and to national security, and I think he's demonstrated that in relation to the funding profile in defence, which I think is an outrage under this government. So that's Andrew Hastie's view is the same as mine, and that's the position.
Because it's changed, if it is.
Well, it's his position, and I can assure you that government that I lead will have a very strong defence force. There is a morale issue within defence at the moment, and it's because Richard Marles is the Defence Minister and Anthony Albanese is the Prime Minister. You speak to people in uniform, the one thing they talk about is just their lack of faith and trust in the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister. They've got a real problem of their own making, and we will invest into defence. We'll rebuild morale because we've got the best defence force in the world. We're well respected, and I will always do everything I can to treat the men and women of the Australian Defence Force with the respect they deserve.
Mr. Dutton, just on some of your other candidates, the Benelup candidate didn't accurately disclose some of his fundraising and has been tied to a CCP-linked high roller. Your QYON candidate has pitched herself as a renter struggling to enter the housing market but owns 2 properties. Your Bradfield candidate was named in a significant workplace settlement by the Commonwealth. Do any of these reports concern you, and can voters be assured that you're taking integrity issues?
Well, look, I think if you have a look at the candidates that we've selected across many seats, unbelievable contributors to their local community. They've worked hard. Now, the Labor Party has people who have been union secretaries and other positions in the unions and in the CFMEU and others. I mean, there are Labor sitting members who are supported and endorsed and have been only able to come into Parliament because of the CFMEU support. Even to this day, the financial support that's provided by the CFMEU through proxies to sitting Labor members. The CFMEU is an organised crime gang. They are involved in arrangements with outlaw motorcycle gang members. So am I going to take a morals lecture from Anthony Albanese when it comes to these matters? No, I'm not, because the Labor Party has ties with the CFMEU, $12 million worth of donations from the CFMEU. So we're not taking any morals lectures.
So you stand by all of those?
Yes, of course I do. Yes.
Can I
Yeah.
get some clarity on a couple of things? You said yesterday person decline. Given that that's well above the natural attrition rate now, and you've said that you will be keeping frontline roles, what assumptions are you making? How are you sort of confident that you will get those cuts? And could you give a bit of explanation about what you actually consider a frontline public servant? Is it someone who has Services Australia, for example?
Well, Claire, I'll leave the PBA costing release to the appropriate time, and that obviously will be further in the campaign. This election is about how we treat Australians with the dignity that they deserve, and that includes making sure that we spend wisely and efficiently, and not in a wasteful way, the taxes that they earn and pay. And I think the readers of the Daily Telly would be frankly more interested in how we can help them with their problems, because at the moment they are struggling to keep their head above water. And what I want to do, and I don't make any apology for this, is if there's waste within the budget and Labor has built up wasteful spending, I want to make sure that that money can get back to families, to frontline services, to supporting doctors, to supporting nurses, to making sure we can support the Australian Defence Force. And we can achieve that through a measured approach, as was evidenced in the Howard years. And that's exactly what we'll do. Yes,
You say Australia is heading into a recession under Labor. Can you promise there will be no recession under you?
Well, what I can tell you is that almost 2 years families have lived in a recession already in this country. They've gone backwards under this Prime Minister. So when you say who's delivered a recession, the Prime Minister has and the Treasurer has. That's how good they are at economics. They've delivered budget after budget. They completely stuffed around for the first 16 months with the voice. They wasted $425 million. The Prime Minister has never apologised for that, has never apologised for it. And I can say to you now that if you have a look at the track record of the coalition when we were in government, we provided support to people, we grew the economy, we helped people through the period of COVID. The economy will always be better managed under a coalition government. And what you're seeing from a panicked Treasurer at the moment, saying that there'll be a 50-point reduction in interest rates next month, he's broadcasting to the Australian people that he believes that under his watch, there will be a recession. Now, we will get into government, and if we're fortunate enough to do so, after May 3, we will clean up Labor's mess. We'll help families, we'll get electricity and gas prices down, we'll manage the economy so that we can lower inflation, we'll help young Australians achieve the dream of home ownership again, which has been lost under this government. We will make sure that our health services are first class, properly funded, and provide support to families who are missing out at the moment because bulk billing has plummeted under Mr Albanese. That's what we'll take to the next election, and that can give Australians every assurance that better days will be ahead, because a Labor Greens government is going to see higher inflation and higher, not lower, interest rates.
Mr. Dutton, when you announced your work from home policy, you said it would increase productivity. Do you still believe that getting public servants back into the office would have an economic benefit?
Well, I think we dealt with that issue yesterday.
No, does it still have an economic benefit?
Well, we dealt with that issue yesterday, and the arrangements that apply now apply prospectively. So that's, well, it'll have the economic benefit that it does now. Yep.
Mr. Dutton, I'm sure the press pack is enjoying the fuel station tour of Australia.
You're not?
Get a coffee every time, it's good.
It's good.
But the nuclear sites, you've got 7, you haven't been to any of them. Are you avoiding it? And can we expect a backflip on that issue?
Well, we're certainly not. If you have a look at what Labor's done to the economy, one of the big reasons that you're paying 30% more for groceries now is because everyone's electricity and gas bills have gone through the roof. The Prime Minister promised on 97 occasions that power bills would come down by $275. They're up by $1,300. And the Prime Minister goes into this election promising Australians that they'll pay more for electricity, more for gas, therefore more for groceries, more for every item in their household budget. We are going to this election promising from day one that we'll cut petrol prices by 25 cents a litre, which will help pensioners, it will help families, it will help small businesses. It is an economy-wide benefit. And that's why it's a very significant decision that we've taken. The Prime Minister's saying 70 cents a day and a tax cut in 15 months' time. It's a joke. And so what do we then do? Well, over the medium term, and by the end of this calendar year, going forward, we bring more gas into the system, which reduces the cost of wholesale gas by about 15%. That will have benefit to households, to energy users, to brick manufacturers, to steel manufacturers. That will reduce the cost of construction to address Labor's housing crisis. Then we bring in the best technology in the world, which is being embraced by the Labor Party in the United Kingdom. China is building 29 nuclear power stations as we speak. The United States has a bipartisan position in relation to this technology, and we will bring it into our country because we'll have reliable power, we'll have cheaper power, not the 3 times power price that we're paying at the moment. It'll be 44% cheaper under our model and $263 billion cheaper than what Labor's proposing under their model. So I'm very proud of the energy policy that we've got. And I think Australians who know what we achieved with AUKUS, which underpinned our national security for the next century, know that with our energy policy, we will underpin energy security for our country for the next century as well. All right?
3.4 magnitude earthquake in Singleton overnight, Mr. Dutton. Does that concern you at all, given there would be a Dutton nuclear power station not that far up the road at Musselburgh?
Tim, if you have a look at France, for example, where there's about 70% of the energy system supplied with nuclear, if you have a look at what's happening in Ontario, if you have a look at what's happening around the world, I just think if the Prime Minister had concerns about safety, why would he have signed up to AUKUS? Why would the Labor Party have signed up to AUKUS? They're not talking about safety, are they? So you can rely on the best advice as to siting, and we've spoken about that. Now, I think there are experts that have addressed this issue, and I just refer you back to some of the statements that they've made. They don't have any concerns in relation to the sites. I don't at all. And I actually think it's incumbent on all of us to have a mature conversation about this because it is in our country's best interests. We are going to have blackouts and brownouts under Labor's policy. The green hydrogen dream has evaporated. We need to have baseload power. We need to make sure that families and pensioners can afford to turn the lights on and the heating on over the course of this winter. And under Chris Bowen's plan, it is a train wreck. And our country deserves a better debate. And frankly, the Prime Minister should be up for it. But he's not. That much is obvious. Peter Malinauskas certainly is and supports strongly the nuclear policy, as does Keir Starmer, as does Joe Biden and many others who have looked at this technology. I think it's a very significant way in which we can reduce costs, we can decarbonise, and we can have reliable power. And that way people will invest in our economy. And if we have more people investing, bearing in mind there's been a 3-fold increase in the number of manufacturing businesses have closed under Mr Albanese's watch, that's less taxes being paid, less people being employed. And if we want to deal with the economic headwinds that are coming, we're going into a very uncertain period. We don't know what the United States will do next. We don't know what China will do next by way of retaliation. We've got the Treasurer in a panic state telling us that there's a recession coming next month. The Prime Minister has no idea what to do. We need to make sure that we can grow our economy and create the buffers that Angus spoke about before. And only a Liberal national coalition team at the next election can deliver that for the Australian people. Thank you very much.
7 years, the most powerful election team.
No, you don't.
Yes, we do. I just said